Hi, welcome to the second set of lectures introducing spreadsheets. We'll probably split this up into two sections, Part A and Part B, just to keep the times from getting too large. Basic overview of what we're going to do. Look at some of the built-in basic functions and statistic functions, namely the sum, average, standard deviation. There's so many different functions that are already built into Excel. It's something that you can explore on your own. But these are some basic ones that can prove useful. We're also going to look at how to do conditional statements in Excel and how to do some conditional formatting, which can make some tables look a little bit nicer. All right, let's talk about the basic functions. The way that you write the basic functions is basically the same as you write any other thing, at least at the start. You type the equal sign, and that lets it know that you want to use a formula. As soon as you start typing something in, Excel will start to try to guess at what you mean. So if I type in an S, it's going to think that I might want something starting with an S. Once you do that, once you type in the thing that you want, you just select the cells that you want to perform that operation on. So for sum, we would type in equals sum, and then we would select the range of cells that we want to take the sum of. The same thing with average, and the same thing with standard deviation. Now, some of you might not really know what a standard deviation is. If you haven't taken statistics yet and you're not taking it this year, then the shortest answer that I can give you to what is standard deviation is it's a measure of the variation in the data. What we'll use it for, in part, is to identify how good the data is, in the sense of, is there a lot of error and uncertainty in the data, or is the data pretty consistent? And we can talk more about how that gets used for analyzing the data. But for now, you just need to know how to calculate it quickly using Excel, and that's STDEV and the range. All right, let's take a quick look over here at a spreadsheet. I have it set up so that we're going to measure the position of something, say a car, at different times. And we're going to do it a couple of different times. You should probably do it more often than 3 times. Maybe like minimum of 5 or 6, ideally 10 or more would be good. But in the constraints of our class, we typically won't have the chance to go quite that far. So the first thing we need to do is put in time. So I'm going to put them in at increments of 1 second. I'm going to start off with a 0. And there's a couple ways that you can do this quickly and easily. One is to type in equals the value of the cell above that plus 1. And that gives me 1 because it's 0 plus 1. And then I can fill this down however far I'm going to go, however many seconds. And it automatically does those calculations. So if I'm on row 11, it's looking at what's in row 10. I'm going to add 1 to that. So that's one option. Another option is you could actually start typing in the series and then highlight that region and do a fill down. And it just continues the trend that it sees, which is pretty cool that it can do this. If you were going every 2 seconds, it would pick up on the trend and it would go with that. So it's really a cool feature. You could also just do this programmatically. Oops. By setting equals the previous cell plus 2, and we could get that value. As far as the positions, I'm just going to make up some positions. All right, so I have some numbers here, and what we're going to do first of all is we'll just take the average. So I'm going to go into the cell, equals, and then I'll start typing average, and it comes up with possibilities, tells us a little bit about what each one is. If I click on it, it'll tell me about it. I just want a simple average. So if I go ahead and I hit the tab button, or I hit double click, and I'm just going to hit tab right now, it finishes it off for me, so I don't have to type out the whole thing. And then it gives us a little bit of help, and it gives us an indication of what do we want to do the average of. And you could put in individual values, or you could just select the range that you want to use. And a range is just a collection of cells. So I'm going to click here and drag over. So I'm clicking and holding down the mouse button, and I dragged over. I could also just type that in. Close the parenthesis, and it takes the average. Now it's noticed that something's a little bit weird because it's not doing this for everything. So I'll just go ahead and I'll fill down, and we should be okay. So we now have average values for each of these rows. Another way to do this would have actually been to go up to this tab called Formulas and look up what they have. So you could, for instance, press the Insert Function button, and it already knows we're doing averages, so that's not that interesting. But if I do Insert Function here, then it'll ask us which one we want to use. You can see here that there's sums, there's counts, where you can count how many cells have something in it, for instance. You can do sine functions, cosine functions. Make sure you use radians if you use those. But there's also different categories. So under statistical, we would find somewhere here standard deviation. Okay, I prefer just to know what they are and start typing them in, and we get standard deviation. And I'm going to do standard deviation of the same same 3 cells, and I get my standard deviation. Now I can click and drag that down, and we can see the standard deviation for each of the sets of trials. So at 24 seconds, what's the standard deviation of those values, and so on. Of course, I can make that look a little bit cleaner, right? Okay, so we now have more of a range of the data that's on the same level as our actual averages. Alright, that's about it for taking averages and standard deviations. You can do the same thing with really any other functions, sums, those types of things. Simple built-in functions. If you want to do sines, you're generally only going to be taking one value as the argument. This right here is called the argument, what you're putting into it. If you wanted to find out the average of an average, you certainly could do that, those types of things. If you wanted to do the standard deviation of multiple sets of numbers, you could do that, and it would work. It doesn't really serve any purpose here to do it. One other thing I'll draw your attention to just briefly is notice that it's using relative references, so that we only had to type in the formula one time, and then we were done. So I'm going to stop this video, but I'm going to continue, pick up where I left off, and we're going to do some conditional statements and conditional formatting in the next video.